Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for the talk, What It Takes to Innovate, Methodologies for Designing, Igniting the Near Future. We go to the next slide there. There's Fabrizio and myself. Jeff kindly did our introductions. So if we move to slide 3, we really wanted to jump in and get everybody into the mindset of what is innovation. You know, when we think of innovation, we think of kind of rockets blasting up in the air, right? You know, virtual reality, augmented reality, robots. I mean, Fabrizio, like when you think of innovation, what are the things that people are talking about?
I think mainly of people, and rather than the technology that comes with it, there's a lot of work behind, and the synergy and alignment of different stars, if you wanna say it like that. So there's so much that goes behind it that people don't see, and I think it's a long process.
I agree, and I think there's also this kind of interesting mindset too in corporate culture. It's like, is it Post-its? Is it kind of this innovation theater? You know, like all of these different terms that are buzzing around for innovation. And so if we go to the next slide here, what Fabrizio and I did for everybody is we took this definition of innovation. Personally, I really like this definition. It's from Tunde Vicky. He's the author of The Corporate Startup. And what's interesting about this definition here, right, the creation of new products and services that deliver values to customers in a manner that's supported by sustainable and profitable, business models. And I think that's where a lot of companies kind of miss the mark, right? It's always about kind of like, let's come up with something new, let's be really creative. But oftentimes it's forgetting about where does that ladder up to the business. And Fabrizio, you know, if there's anything you'd like to add, if you're seeing that.
I totally agree with you. It's I think one of the main pain points is with regards to innovation and deploying, whether it's technology or it's an interesting ad format or it's a creative solution, content. Sometimes they're just gimmicky and they're just not well integrated with the rest of the vision for the brand. So in most cases, they come out of, you know, the result of an agency you work with for the first time, who just did a wonderful sales pitch with a very competitive offering. But maybe it's a bit detached from what the brand essence really is. So I think in most of the times we need to make sure, especially on a brand side, to tie those activations, again, whether it's marketing or it's technology that we're introducing, that they're part of a story that's way bigger than the single activation. It's not a PR stunt. It has to be something that's coherent, and that comes from actually what we call key pillars in the brand essence. So if you've got a brand whose essence is not technology, but maybe it's craftsmanship, everything you do has to somehow relate to that, and there has to be, in case of craftsmanship, probably a connection with heritage. There has to be a connection with touching, smelling, and feeling, and things that definitely are more coherent with that kind of mission, rather than just a single activation using beacons, for instance. So as you said, it has to be coherent, and it's not easy.
Completely agree. And if we go to the next slide here, one of the things that Fabrizio and I did is, you know, when we think about our main topic today, what does it take to innovate? And these are kind of the core pillars that we outlined here. So, you know, kind of building on that last point Fabrizio said about everything laddering up to, you know, that kind of overall mission, you know, company vision, business goals. That's really what we're talking about here. When we say align mission, vision, and business goals, everything should ladder up and be really purposeful. And then when we look at executive sponsorship and investment, you know, again, kind of as Fabrizio said, you know, oftentimes there can be these sort of one-off projects and everything, or innovation. It's kind of like, oh, we have some time, let's have this sort of afterthought and go make something, right? But really where innovation programs are successful is having that executive sponsorship, you know, leadership and investment from the top. You know, innovation should be a part of integrated into the whole business. So
there's a
Fabrizio.
story that comes into my mind with regards to that, which is actually really interesting. It has nothing to do with businesses. It's mainly got to do with science and actually one of the biggest revolution in physics. So Newton was basically no one, and he actually developed his universal law of gravity after stimuli from Edmund Halley, who we know for the Halley comet. He actually didn't discover the Halley comet. He anticipated that it would have passed after, I think, 75 or 72 years after his death. Thanks to the laws that were developed by Newton. And so Newton would have never been able to come up with that revolution and that new concept of the laws that are working in the space we live in are actually applied also in space and between planets and so on. And he would have never reached this achievement without someone that actually sponsored him, both from a psychological point of view, so kept him motivated, but also on an economical perspective. Edmund Halley ended up having to sell a lot of books, basically, that he inherited from the Royal Society, because there was no way of getting paid just to pursue the task that Newton had.
No, it's a good point. And when you talk about kind of different thinking, that brings us to our next point there of that diverse perspectives, right? And I think, it's so important for companies, whether it be in the innovation team, but really in all teams, considering diverse perspectives. I think the most successful companies I've seen have been the ones who've gone out and got people who have maybe they don't have direct experience from what they're doing. They haven't worked at a competitor. They haven't had sort of the MBA pedigree, but they've been, kind of a entrepreneurial self-learner, maker, creator, and, having those kind of people in an organization, or people from different backgrounds and experiences, and really having that diverse team, that's where you get, the most innovation. It's kind of like I tell people, like when you're making a cake, if you just have flour, you're going to have flour, but you got to like mix in all the different ingredients, and then you got dessert, right?
Exactly. I think people tend to underestimate this element. The less diversity there is in an environment, the more likely there is that innovation won't happen. One interesting stat, which actually discovered a couple of years back when I went to Japan, is Japan has a 2% immigration rate, which compared to Canada, which I think is 21%, is very, very low. This means that the really, really low level of races mixing up and mindsets mixing up. So the impression we have of Japan, so the huge technological empire of the 80s, is actually dying, and the amount of startups that are basically born in Japan is really, really low. There's basically none. In the US, I think 50% of the startups are generated by people that were immigrants. That gives you an idea of what diversity also means in these terms. So people that come from different environments and can actually bring that added value with a different perspective. So it is a delicate subject, diversity, but again, it doesn't have to be a gimmick. It's a strategy, and it's crucial, and it's important.
I think so too. And I think just kind of the last point there to reinforce is when we think about, diversity, it's everything from recruitment, right? And being mindful of it and open to the type of people and experiences that we're bringing on board. And then it's also in teams, right? So, integrating different perspectives, maybe you were talking about craftsmanship earlier, right? So maybe there's someone and, on the weekends, they're building and making, their own sort of leather belts, or, so that handcraftness, right? And then bringing that into a group where you might be ideating with new technologies. They're going to have that different, that different maker view, right? And so that's why I think it's really important. It's everything from recruitment, through integrating through the team, and then obviously, growth throughout the organization and having that different perspective all the way to senior leadership.
Yeah, so. Absolutely.
And then kind of the next point here I really wanted to jump in on was programs, not projects. Again, kind of reinforcing that, you know, innovation isn't a project or kind of just a one-off experimentation, but that importance of, you know, planning it out, looking at, you know, how are we going to keep that ongoing pipeline planned out? How does that align with the products we have already coming out? How is that involved, you know, improving existing products, and what's the process for that? So, I mean, Fabrizio, you know, you're kind of living that right now. So if there's anything you want to add to that, would be great.
Yeah, there's at the moment there's huge changes happening, and the need of efficiency is increased because of course, the budget restrictions. And so coming up with solutions is even more crucial and more important in a moment like this of crisis. I think there's a couple of elements here that I can bring up. For instance, there's the introduction of NFC technology and RFID technology, which is completely revolutionizing the time it takes to track something across the logistics, and it's present in store or in the back end of the store. And again, these are things that have an impact within one silo, you would think at the beginning, but actually when you start talking to the rest of the business, you realize how much of an added value it can be also for marketing, you know, to allow NFC to be tapped and to give additional information to the customer with regards to whether the product is authentic or not, for instance, or traceability, so all the sustainability side of things, together with CRM and the ability of collecting data after sales with the same technology. Again, logistics to track everything, retail to make sure that, you know, you don't have to scan barcodes anymore, but you just you do massive readings of boxes instead of having to unbox everything. So again, it's finding that technology and or that innovation in general, because it can be software, it can be hardware, or it can be process or people. And then talking to the business, which is probably connecting to what we have there as communicate shared learnings, because constant communication is another element that allows you to connected with the other ones before to actually bring added value and create innovation. So again, I have something, I don't keep it for me, I make sure everybody knows what is happening, and then ultimately make sure that if anyone can benefit from it, we're also putting that into the businesses available.
Yeah, that's a good point. There have been some cases where I've worked in really early innovation with design and innovation teams with companies with multiple brands, right? And so we might do an experiment with a particular technology, and maybe it's playing out into different stories, and then looking at that and see how might that apply to the other brands, you know, within the organization. And instead of just sort of letting everybody fend for themselves, what we would do is really gather everybody around and just kind of have, you know, a session and be like, look, this worked really, really well. This was terrible. Don't do that, right? Here's some of the things we learned, and really just trying to share, you know, having that shared learning so everybody else can be set up for success. And it's almost like you really want to challenge each other. Like, okay, we did this first one. Okay, how is the next one going to be better? Or how are we going to roll this out into another line or another collection, right? And
I think it also connects with one of the questions we got from the audience, which is how do you balance the line between innovation and look ahead, innovating to fundamentally change behavior versus looking ahead to prepare the business for 18 months out? A tough problem, because of course, if you take it on one direction, you have the SpaceX kind of revolution, which is, you know, I'm not asking you if you know, Bill Ford's Harry Ford's most famous quote is, if I asked people, one of the most famous, if I asked people what they wanted in the early 900s, they would have asked for faster horses. So on one side, you want to plan for the 18 months, but on the other side, if you want to have a vision that is completely revolutionizing, like SpaceX is having to, in the idea of reusing the rockets they used to launch things in outer space to reduce the costs of space exploration, then that's a completely revolutionizing idea. And I think you can afford that only if you had huge budgets. If you can do research, and R&D isn't something that most brands have available, if not the biggest ones only. And sometimes I think there was an article I read a couple of weeks ago about the fact that most of the innovations and patents that are developed by Apple and Google are actually well balanced between internal and freelancers from outside. And so I think it's hard to plan innovation, and it's hard to plan for the very long term in terms of disruption. We should, but if we work practically in our day-to-day and look at our businesses, in most cases, what people are really interested and I'm absolutely sorry, because this is exactly the problem with politics, for instance, is that we're looking at the short term, not the long term. But we are asked normally in terms of objectives to look only at that. So if you think about our appraisals on a yearly basis, they're based on yearly objectives, not on the direction we're going. So most of the times it's the business that's asking the wrong questions.
Well, and so two things I'd like to add there. One, you brought up a really good point with KPIs, right? And so that is a massive challenge, not only with large companies, but also small companies. But where I've seen it so blatant is in the larger companies, right? Marketing has their goals, right? Calls, clicks, visits, sales. Product has their goals, right? Finance has their goals. And so again, planning, making sure you have alignment, making sure that it's like when we're doing these programs, here's the measures of success, and kind of having that buy-in through the organization. And then the other part, I wanted to jump in on the question here, in terms of balancing the line of short-term and long-term. I think the really important part there is having that kind of pipeline of innovation and really planning for that. Like, you're not going to have all the answers, right? But if there's an approved budget, there's key goals, there's those KPIs we talked about, and marrying them up and kind of showing the progress along the way, that's where you're going to have success. And what I'm really excited about that question is because that actually segues beautifully into the methodology section. So if we kind of jump ahead to 2 slides there to our methodologies. So these right here are, LiveArea X are innovation methodologies. And these are really, these are kind of hot off the press. We've been doing a little bit of testing with these, again, with different perspectives, coming in and really looking at the business, really looking at how obviously the climate we're in is changing right now. Companies have had to shift their entire business models. We don't have, 18 months, right, to come up with a new product and figure out, manufacturing and all this stuff that needs to go in the store, and what are the new tills going to look like, and what, there's just not that time to do it. We have to act now. And so in designing these methodologies, we really wanted to keep that in mind. Like, how can we quickly jump in, right, get consumer insights, test them, get team alignment and consensus building, and then rapidly develop prototypes. So I'll swiftly jump into these here for a moment. So the first one there, product playground. And really what product playground is, it's where we give consumers a particular product and competitors' products. We have done this virtually. In our experience, in testing these in prior methodologies, they have been in person, but all of these methodologies, we have been testing and getting great feedback and developing programs, again, doing that virtually. We would make sure everybody's safe, and that functionally we're getting the right data out of it. So product playground, again, that is where we will ship specific products, competitive products, to hand raisers to participate. We'll actually have conversations with consumers, so they'll kind of play, tinker with those competitive products. We'll actually have designers or innovation members from the team participating in the discussion. We don't, we don't give all of the background of everybody who's there. It's just kind of like as a team, and we're having a conversation, and we're really looking at how consumers are behaving, from packaging to what is their experience. And then that sounds like regular consumer testing, right? But the difference is we kind of turn it on its head in that we get consumers actually sketching, asking the questions as we're seeing some of the challenges they're experiencing, but getting them sketching, and whether it's making one of those products better, whether it's, creating their own product, and really sharing, their thoughts, and getting people their confidence to sort of sketch out their ideas and talk with us about them. And then basically what we do is we distill all of those out into a sort of digital whiteboard, and then talk through that. We take that information and then use it to inspire and ignite ideas with design and innovation teams. So it's a great input if you're kind of wanting to know, okay, we can do all this competitive research, but how are people really behaving? This is a great way to do it. You can see it's sort of 1 to 2 week time frame to get those results. And it's not just sort of, it goes into the agency and you get your report. It's, we're having those team members in the conversation, sort of hands-on, getting that data firsthand. And it's just a lot of fun, really. The next one here I'm going to jump into is the Ignite design sessions. And so what, Ignite design sessions are, so that it's really inspired from design studio methodology. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but effectively what we have our own sort of take and remix of that. But basically we talk with those key stakeholders, and it's not sort of separate stakeholder interviews, rather kind of like a roundtable discussion. Find out what's working, what's not working in the business, identify a specific, if there's a specific business need or challenge, design challenge, and really creating a persona and brief around that. And then similarly to the product playground session that we had, we're getting cross-functional teams. So you may have a person from finance there. You may have a person from marketing, from product, from design, from, everybody. We want those different perspectives, and we want to get everybody sketching. And basically with this, there are kind of timed exercises, and we get everybody sketching, sharing their ideas, and do that through, a certain amount throughout the day. By the end of the day, we're sort of distill. So I always joke with people that there's going to be a lot of ideas. That doesn't mean they're great ideas. That doesn't mean they're super stellar ideas. But what it means is it's getting people sketching and then distilling down the best ideas that are going to ladder up to the business. So kind of what Fabrizio was saying earlier on about everything needs to fit with the mission and the goals and those KPIs. Like we're building that together. And then really coming out of the session collectively, there's consensus building and alignment on, hey, we're going to go prototype rather these sort of 3 to 5 ideas, and then working on an action plan for that. And so again, that's that kind of quick 1 to 2 week time frame there. And then kind of lastly, rounding it out here, is the Evoke XP rapid realization. And so what that is it's really, again, a collaborative approach to early product development. So if you've had the Ignite session, it actually feeds really nicely into there because you've kind of determined and aligned on what those prototypes are. So this is basically, working on low fidelity prototypes based on that, and also getting some consumer feedback. And what that does, is that helps alleviate, high risk of maybe you want to know about a new technology to invest in, like Fabrizio is talking about, NFC, RFID being really important. Maybe there's, augmented reality numbers are going up at the moment. VR e-commerce are going up at the moment. Here's a light way of testing out some of those experiences and prototyping those, again, before investing really big. And so these are some of the methodologies that we're currently launching right now. And I didn't know, Fabrizio, if there was anything you wanted to add or share, because I know you're kind of living in this world of having to adjust by the second.
Yeah, I mean, the methodologies keep changing anyway. There isn't one that works and one that doesn't. It's just the one that works in that specific moment. In my experience in the coming also from an agency background, the best creative solutions we came up with in the past, or one of the most interesting ones actually, coming out of brainstormings, were actually coming from personal assistants, so PAs, rather than creatives themselves. So it's an interesting take to yours when you talked about the Ignite sessions, because it's exactly where that diversity we talked about helps bring additional value in terms of a different point of view, seeing problems that we can see, challenges, but also opportunities that you don't see by yourself. And then rapid realization, yes, fast prototyping is something that we use a lot, for instance. One of the most recent one is we've developed a technology that allows us to be more efficient in the way we print, so that it reduces 25% of the usage of fabric and 15% usage of ink, just by printing in a different way and printing only the areas we use instead of wasting everything as we used to do. And that had to go through a process of rapid prototyping. So we had the idea, the concept, we needed a proof of concept. So we found a supplier that actually was willing to invest in the idea, because that's another methodology. Finding a partner that's actually willing to believe in it, and because they know they can get benefit in the long term. And so you do the rapid prototype or the proof of concept for free, and you present it to senior stakeholders, and then when that is actually approved because you show cost benefits, then it gets into development phase. So that's another methodology. And again, as I said, it's there isn't one that works and works always. It's just the one that works in the right moment. And so being flexible and knowing what the instruments are based on the teams you've got available. Sometimes you've got to do it by yourself. So there's no brainstorming basically. Other times you got a lot of people to talk to. So maybe it depends on really the context and the budgets and the kind of approach the company has.
Cool. If we go to the next slide here, I think this actually ties in nicely again to that question that came up in terms of like, how do you plan these things out? Because things are always changing. And so this is just an example for you guys to see what we're doing at LiveArea at the moment. At the left there, these are kind of different business design challenges. So it could be, again, exploring that competitive product. Maybe we do a product playground for that, and plan out, okay, we're going to get the results. We're going to talk with, leadership, kind of who's the right team, et cetera. Boom, go into Ignite session. Here, kind of Fabrizio, as you mentioned, experimenting with new technologies. So we have, we might be experimenting with RFID logistics, right? That's not going to make sense necessarily to bring a consumer on board, but it does make sense from an Ignite session, again, to your point of having finance or marketing and all the different perspectives involved, because it's going to be an investment, right?
Sure. You can do that without the store manager, for instance. So it has to be a core work.
Exactly. And then here you can see that these are mapped out. Again, this is just kind of an example of how you can have that ongoing innovation, test and learn, right? And across multiple things. It's not just a straight stream of doing one experimentation, but the idea of getting multiple experiments going, right? So you're constantly
learning. You gotta be ready. I think that's one of the main points. Out of the many things we could say it takes to innovate, I think failure is probably one of those. So you gotta know that you're gonna fall, and you're gonna have to step up and keep running and look back and see why did you fall and what can you do to avoid tripping the next time. So failure is gonna be part of the job. Not all businesses are mature enough to accept that and understand that there's a test and learn, a continuous test and learn, and people take themselves too seriously. I think one of the main challenges these days in businesses is exactly that. There's a lot of pressure, of course, to perform, but taking things too seriously probably are counterintuitive and counter-effective, because of course it castrates in some way the essence of innovation, where sometimes you just have to go with the flow and accept out of 10 things you'll do, probably 9 will fail, and then the one you actually manage to accomplish will be revolutionizing. I think that has to be the approach if you want to do things in this way. And again, I appreciate not all businesses are mature enough to accept that. Mm-hmm. So in my experience, there's always been an element of beware. There is a risk, and there's always going to be one.
I think that's spot on, because even when I've had conversations with companies with innovation maps and programs, I'm very upfront. I'm like, look, guys, to your point, we're making 10 of these. One of them might hit. So just like from the get-go, that's the expectation. Like, we will not, and I've even said, we will not be making all of these. I'm pretty certain we will not be making all of these, because a lot of them are going to fail, and a lot of them are going to help spawn other things that we're going to be doing, right?
Exactly.
And if we go to I just kind of want to jump ahead here to the next section in terms of consumer trends. On the next slide there.
Can we check how much time we've got left, just so we can coordinate in terms of if we need to speed up or anything? Perfect, 10, 15 minutes. Okay, cool.
Okay, wonderful. No, good shout. So in terms of consumer trends, I think now sort of in the world of COVID that we're living in at the moment, these experiences here, this was like less than 6 months ago, right? 6 months to a year ago. It was all about kind of having that in-store experience, right? Everything from Apple having classes to live music to, you can see there with Lush putting things on your face. Oh my gosh, who's going to be doing that now, right? And then in the Nike store, really having that in-store play, similarly with IKEA and the examples here. But really, the point here is that things have changed, companies have adapted, right? Nike brought everybody online. They were getting everybody kind of working out from home, breaking down price barriers and getting everybody kind of active. Apple's done a good job of kind of monitoring, what areas are having, high COVID impact and closing those stores, or doing buy online and pick up in store. Lululemon, we saw with the big acquisition yesterday of Mirror. I want one of those just to kind of get fit in the house. But I think and then also with Ulta and Sephora, experimenting more in the AR space, stopping obviously those in-store makeup sessions that you can see there. So it's been really exciting to see how brands are adapting, in the physical and digital world here.
I think the best point here in terms of takeouts would be, you mentioned AR, VR. What we're talking about, regardless of what the technology is, it's a mixture of physical and digital. And so, again, there might be instances in which one doesn't work and the other one does, or more appropriate. There might be an instance where to get more people to your store, you might do a treasure hunt on TikTok using AR. Using AR, yeah. But what really matters, I think, is understanding what the actual objective is, making sure that implementation is part of a bigger story and a bigger strategy that's got a starting point and an end point in mind. So back to the question about the 18 months and so on, I think having a clear view of where you want to go is very important. And this is, I think mainly a watch out for marketing guys out there. That most of the times we were pressured to find a creative solution that is nice and enticing for our audience, but then maybe not necessarily working for the ultimate goal, which in most cases is drive to store. Has always been drive to store. So nowadays it's more either a drive to store or a drive to e-commerce. And so maybe we've got different experiences that start offline that actually drive us to e-commerce, and we need to find creative solutions to make that path happen. And then on the opposite side, there might be digital experiences that might drive people more into the store when appropriate, maybe just by booking your appointment to make sure you're avoiding COVID limitations and so on. So again, it's always a mixture of the two. It's not one that's going to jeopardize the other one. I think it's the ability of mixing and balancing the two in the right way according to the objective in that moment.
I agree. And I think we're seeing, even more so now that fluidity of being in the physical and digital world, right? It's not just about the purchase, but kind of what happens after the purchase, right? How are we creating, loyalty? How are we, making it really nice? Like, hey, how is that shirt that you got? Hey, you might like this, how can we kind of anticipate those needs while, in store, making that experience super fast. But also, being helpful with consumers.
Exactly. One thing I can think of is, for instance, we're coming from generations before us that, of course, had their experiences completely offline. Mm-hmm. And then we're the first generations that are having them mixed. And then probably in future, who knows how far away, probably not. They're completely going to be digital. Think of Neuralink and the fact that our brains probably are going to be uploaded online, and information can be downloaded as quickly as 1 second. So the point is, maybe in future, when a customer comes into store, he already knows everything about the product. Mm-hmm. It's already like that because even the purchase funnel in the automotive industry has changed completely. It used to be 7 months before you started thinking of buying a car, understanding what type of car you need, and then filtering it down to what model you want, what brand you want to go with, and then having to test 3 or 4 different cars. Now you go directly into the dealership, you already know which car you want to buy. So the whole process is changing, and even the knowledge and preparation and technology that comes to serve that customer has to evolve probably quite quickly in the next couple of years, but definitely at the moment has to be the mixture of the two.
Completely agree. If we go to the next slide here, we've actually outlined a couple of key points for everyone, really just kind of by the numbers. So some of these we touched on just a moment ago, but contactless payments, growing by 150%. And that was just in 1 year. And then when we look at kind of consumers wanting mobile payments, right? 34% of consumers want mobile payments, and that's kind of in that post-COVID or in COVID world. Another thing really important, and Fabrizio, you touched on this a moment ago, as far as people, living in the digital world, being in the physical world, consumers, they want that self-checkout experience. For me personally, I've been at my local grocery store. I want to do self-checkout. I don't want to be in the store for a long time. I don't want to be queuing up, with my frozen pizza or whatever, I'm buying. I want to get in, I want to get those things, and I want to get out. And even in self-checkouts, there's still massive queues happening. So what can we do to, alleviate some of those experiences? Again,
I think you just stabbed me in the heart with the frozen pizza story. Sorry.
I know, when I said that, I'm like, oh, I know. It's Newman's. It goes to a good cause, okay?
It's efficient. You can warm it up quickly. I understand that.
Okay, to that point, we did, in kind of the spirit of, staying at home, COVID baking and everything like that, we did make homemade pizza. My son made one the shape of an egg. I'm not exactly sure why. Mine was the shape of the Millennium Falcon with some good toppings on it. So
I like that.
I think that makes up for it.
Yeah, it does.
Cool. And then just some other stats here we've carved out. We talked about VR experiences. Obviously, Fabrizio, the world you're living in, there's the fitting room process, right? How are people feeling about trying on clothes? You talked about kind of concierges earlier, or booking appointments. It's so clear here in these numbers, that people are wanting those VR experiences, or wanting those sort of virtual showrooms, and wanting to shop virtually. So I'm not sure if there's anything there you want to add.
I think there's, well, limitations aside of the historical moment, I think there's, as you said, the willingness from consumers, whether it's B2B or B2C consumers, to start spending online and not necessarily physically have to go through the hustle of getting into a shopping mall through a crowded space. Even on a psychological perspective, it's starting to become something people are not used to anymore. So the more frictionless the experience is, I define it like this, the better. So in our experience, we're definitely developing the solutions that are allowing also our B2B consumers, clients, to actually be able to have a shopping experience that is fully digital, especially nowadays that they can travel. There's just a travel ban; they can't come to our showrooms. So these solutions are going to be increasing, and probably once they start using it, they can be live without, and probably they won't need to fly here anymore. So we need to plan ahead and get ready for that kind of solution and offer those kind of solutions. And again, it's the industry that's pushing that direction. It's not only the vision of one brand. I think everybody is at the moment developing one way or another virtual showrooms, because this is exactly what people need.
Well, you're exactly right. And before we go ahead, I just wanted to point out that kind of bottom stat there, right? Virtual shopping experiences, reducing returns by 23%. So it's a pretty significant number, right? It's not just the time and management of the garment, but also the staff and everything else that goes with returns. So 23% reduction rate to have those virtual experiences sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I think one of the main pain points in the past years for e-commerce is returns, because of course the standard that's been set up by Amazon, by the likes of Amazon, Zalando, and all the other, Farfetch, etc. It forced the industry to adapt to a standard that's actually not very cost efficient. So the solution there, you can take quick service and returns out, of course, of the equation, because consumers wouldn't appreciate that. The only thing you can do is make the experience more precise in the site selection and giving advices on how the sizes can be chosen and how the actual fit will be and so on, predicting data based on your height, age, and et cetera, et cetera. So using even artificial intelligence to try to make more efficient and more precise the prediction, so that when the consumer's product arrives at home, he doesn't need to change it. Because otherwise, if we don't find a solution to that, the whole e-commerce might even become unsustainable, not only on a sustainable point of view in terms of impact in the environment, because that's additional shipping, that's twice as shipping as it would be normally. But also in terms of an experience, because of course when I get something and I want it quickly, I also don't want to give it away and wait another couple of days for it to come back, if it's 2 days.
Completely agree. If we go to the next slide here, we'll kind of jump into some of we call it enabling the future. And so on the next slide, basically this one here, this is one of the real life examples. I'm actually working at the moment with the LiveArea team, and this is our design challenge, right? And we kind of touched on this in the conversation a few moments ago. When I was sharing my pizza example. But really, how can we better connect that physical and digital experience, alleviate queuing, reduce costs, and sales and loyalty, right? That whole consumer experience. So we go to the next slide here. This is what we've been working on. This is our product. It's called LiveArea Scan and Go. And while there have been large companies like Walmart and Sam's Club, experimenting with having an app and having self-checkout experiences, there hasn't been really a way to adopt that to across the specialty stores. And so what we've done at LiveArea is we've created LiveArea Scan and Go, and this is really an extension. We've tested it across 3 e-commerce platforms, still working on development of the others, but it's basically an app-free, no app required, checkout-free experience. I'm not sure if If you guys can click the video there, there's no sound, it's just pure demo. It may or may not play for us. We'll see how it goes. Let's see here.
So you can see he doesn't see the video, so he can play it
on the video. That's okay. You guys should reach out to me and I'll show you guys a demo of it. We do have some working demos at the moment. Unfortunately, now looks like video is not working here online. But basically what Scan and Go does, you'll receive an SMS message, location-based SMS outside of the store, inside the store, welcoming you to the store, letting our consumer know that Scan and Go is available to them. And then from there, basically it's just simple. You register online. You may already be registered if it's a site that you frequent often. Quick registration to the site that also you have the ability to opt into the loyalty program as well. And then simply just go through the store and scan the items you want. We've also created a way that, say you select a top of some sort, we'll say, hey, great top. There might be some trousers, on aisle 7 that you might be interested in, or in a specific spot in the store. The point is kind of guiding the consumer while they're in store, while they're purchasing a product of something that would actually be relevant to them. If not, you can simply pay there. It gives you your electronic receipt, scan on the way out. Gives you a very nice thank you, and then also rewards the customer with that, hey, thanks for being loyal, receive $10 off, on your next Scan and Go purchase. So again, really rewarding the customers for using Scan and Go. So not only is it, alleviating their time, like the pizza example I shared with you, I'll say it again, but alleviating their time in the store, but creating, anticipating what they may want, helping them quickly check out, rewarding them for that. And then from a retailer's perspective, obviously that's less hardware, less tills. We need more space in the stores, not less. So, it might be, shifting some of the logistics around in the store to give a little more space to accommodate, social distancing. But we really see this working well. We've been in conversations with toy retailers, beauty brands, fashion brands already. And so where we're at right now is we're really looking for innovative companies to come, work with us on Scan and Go. Right now, we're looking from a timing perspective, it would take us about 2 to 4 weeks to launch a beta. So again, really fast. We're trying to move fast. So launch a beta with a particular, with a brand, it would take us 2 to 4 weeks. Looking at testing in store, we'd like to do a 2 to 4 week test in store. And then on a formal launch, it would just kind of depend on catalog size, how personalized you want to get, but relatively quick, we can have any of these specialty stores have the power to have that Scan and Go experience. We had the takeaway. There we go. So yeah, just to wrap it up. So yeah, just kind of wrapping everything up. Again, thank everyone for joining. Thank you, Fabrizio, for teaming up with me on this. This was a lot of fun. I feel like we could keep talking about these topics. But yeah, kind of breaking it down, the takeaway for everyone who's attended today or viewing at a later date, again, aligning, making sure all of those, everything, we're creating innovation programs and that they ladder up to that larger mission, strategy, and goals. Having that executive support, sponsorship, and investment. Again, we can't say this enough, including diverse perspectives from recruitment all the way throughout the company and teams. Designing those programs, not projects. So having that ongoing pipeline. Exploring the unknown. So Fabrizio, you talked about this earlier, and really kind of experimenting with new technologies and partners, right, who can help you kind of accelerate what you're doing faster. Embracing that hacker culture, creating this pipeline of experiments, and then communicating the shared learning. So I wasn't sure if there was anything you wanted to wrap up.
No, that's it, and be ready to fail. I mean, that's as sad as it might sound. I think it's part of the process. And again, don't take yourself too seriously. I think it's if we don't give an element of fun in what we do, we'd probably do it really badly, and we would probably be better off doing something else. So I think these are two important elements that we shouldn't lose control of, because these otherwise would control us, and it wouldn't bring us to anywhere. And in terms of if anyone wants to get in touch, my contacts are Dude Rinaldi, basically on most of social networks such as Instagram and Twitter. And then you can find me as Innovation Waves on my podcast and blog if you wanna hear more points of view, where I interview, for instance, profilers, criminologists, fighters, to get a few insights on how I can bring back those learnings into business one day.
Yeah, when we talk about diverse perspectives, Innovation Waves definitely has that. So you guys should check out the podcast and some of the readings. And I can be reached at Val Vacante on most platforms.
Thank you so much, everyone.